We have a lot to cover in today's video, including some pretty significant trade talk around the Toronto Maple Leafs. We've seen new head coach Craig Berube be introduced today, so lots of talk about what kind of players he'd like to have on the roster. Plus, we saw a trade involving Tampa and Nashville, which is also further speculation on what comes next and the fallout from that deal. We also have other news around the NHL regarding front office news on the Ottawa Senators, Los Angeles Kings, plus the fallout from Game 7 last night between Edmonton and Vancouver. The Oilers move on, but what's next for the Canucks? All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to cover here today. Let's get started first by recapping and reviewing Game 7 last night between the Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks. It was a very fun, entertaining game. At least the last 5 to 7 minutes of it was. It was a little bit one-sided through 2 periods of play, with the Edmonton Oilers having a 3-0 lead after the second period. Big lead in shots on goal. Vancouver had their chances. It wasn't that they weren't getting any chances. Just the chances they did have were not hitting the net, so the shots on goal were not piling up, but it just felt like a one-sided affair for the first 40 minutes. The Canucks had a 4-minute power play in the first period on a double minor when Pettersson got a stick to the face, and they didn't even register a shot on net during that power play. To me, the Vancouver Canucks looked like they ran out of gas. Quinn Hughes, to me, looked exhausted. And this was not even at the end of the game. I think he had played about 20 minutes through 2 periods or something crazy. And he just looked exhausted. I do believe, and we'll find out here in the next day or two when they do their locker clean out exit interviews, I think Hughes probably was battling some sort of injury. I know the Nashville series was quite tough on him. Between that and the exhaustion, that's my take on Hughes. I don't know what's going on with Pettersson. Pettersson, quiet again, made a few decent passes and plays, but overall, not an impact player. Not somebody who should be, that you'd expect to be signed. I just recently signed a long-term, huge money, lucrative deal to be one of the top paid players in the NHL. I don't know if there's an injury with Pettersson. It doesn't seem that way because he didn't look great at the end of the regular season. And then, of course, into the playoffs, he was, I don't want to call him non-existent, but he just wasn't really much of a factor. I mean, he made the occasional decent play. Can he not throw a body check without turning his back and doing a reverse hit? That kind of drives me a little crazy. That was the odd time when those hits to me are appropriate, but I've never seen Pettersson, at least not in this year's playoffs. He didn't throw a check, actually a traditional body check. Only the reverse ones. I'm like, can you not just do a regular body check? Anyways, it's just to me, he was quiet as a mouse, and the team just looked gassed. And I think they just ran out of fuel, essentially. I mean, to get to where they were, it took a lot. Some say they overachieved. Some say that they were, a team of destiny. Call it what you want. They certainly had a lot of good things going right. I know at the beginning of the year, Alvin and Rutherford, that's what they said for the Canucks to make the playoffs. A lot of things had to go right, and they did in the regular season. But I guess we'll see. As far as what comes next for the Canucks, lots of questions around the team. Lots of free agents, restricted free agents. Who's going to go? Who's going to stay? What will this team look like next year? It's difficult to say. I know, for example, Elias Lindholm was the one of the bigger deadline acquisitions. He's reportedly looking for around $7 million a year on a longer-term contract. They would like to keep him, but that might be too rich for them. But their salary cap situation to get him signed will be tricky and tough to figure out, but they do want to try. Dakota Joshua had a breakout season, regular season, and then he upped his value even more with a strong playoff. So he's probably looking at, I wouldn't say a super long-term deal, but he's probably able to get 3 to 4 years. Probably he might be pushing $4 million now, maybe 3.5, somewhere in that range. A player they really like, of course. Again, tricky to figure out. Zadorov was come over from Calgary. He might have priced himself out of Vancouver. He had a really, really good playoff. And there's reports that he's looking for around $6 million. Maybe he comes down a little bit to stay. Maybe he's willing to take 5.5. I don't know. But Zadorov is looking for a big payday. That's going to be tricky. They've also got Tyler Myers, Ian Cole, Teddy Bluger. Bluger shouldn't be too difficult to get done, and according to Rick Dollywall, there's definitely interest to keep him. I know there's a lot of history with Cole and obviously the former Penguin brass because they won together in Pittsburgh. He had a rough playoff. I mean, can't say for sure that he's a goner because it won't be as expensive to sign, but I can't say for sure he stays either. Myers, I never thought they'd say this a couple of years ago. They'd love to keep him. Obviously at a much lower number. I think they'd like to have him paid more appropriately, like a third pair D. And I like his size and reach and everything. Like, obviously he played with Susie back there a lot. And, they would like to keep him. So we'll see how things work out. They've got Philip Hronek on the RFA side, who's reportedly looking for an $8 million longer-term contract, and he did nothing in the playoffs. He scored a goal last night in Game 7, first goal of the playoffs. He was extremely quiet the second half of the year and throughout the playoffs. Got off to an amazing start. Played a lot with Quinn Hughes as his main partner. Put up, I think it was 48 points, I believe it was. I mean, you could say that he's a good, good top 4D, right shot. Does have a good shot on that, but $8 million is a bit rich. And I don't think if he won't come off that price tag, there's no way the Canucks are going to sign him to a contract and keep him at $8 million. Problem is I honestly don't know that another team would give it to him either. So I'm not really sure how that's going to work out. Maybe they give his agent permission to shop around. He does have arb rights, and that's, he probably would do well with arbitration. But, in arbitration, you're getting a short-term deal. And they don't really want to go through this again in a year or two time. So at the end of the day, I don't know. Hronek is going to be tough to keep. And if he won't come off the $8 million asking price, there is expectation that they will try to trade him, especially like before the draft. Demko obviously got hurt. Still their top goaltender, but some are saying with the performance of Sheilov, do they consider a Demko trade? And there's some that say absolutely not. Sheilov's was good, but it's too small of a sample size. Others say with Demko's history of injuries, maybe they should move off him while his value is still half decent. And they've obviously got another real gem in Sheilov's here. I don't know. That's tough. I mean, the more logical approach would be for Demko and Sheilov's to be the tandem next year. Casey DeSmith doesn't return, but Sheilov's also was a restricted free agent, so he's getting a raise after the way he played in the playoffs. But, yes, he had a good playoff, but it's a small sample. I don't think he can get huge money, but he'll definitely get a raise. There's no doubt. So it's going to be very tricky for the Canucks to come back next year and resemble the team that just finished out the second round series with the Oilers. But they will do what they can to keep who they can and have to fill in the holes otherwise between free agencies and trade. But they're certainly going to be a very interesting team to watch. There's a lot of pieces there that are potentially moving parts. So like Philip Hronek and Thatcher Demko to me are going to be very interesting. I wouldn't rule out a Demko trade, but I know there's some that think it's too soon. It's crazy. Sheilov's is not, established enough. But to me, I do see the sell high before his value drops anymore with another injury type of deal. So we'll see. I would suspect that Rutherford and Alvin will be patient with the goaltending, and having too many good goalies is a great problem to have. But Canucks have lots of questions. I've seen somebody mention as well, I think it was one of the Canuck medias, I can't remember who it was, suggested maybe buying out Ilya Mikheyev. That would give you, he's got 2 years left, so they would save, I think it was $3.8 million or something like that on the cap for the next couple of years. There's a good savings, but then you have 2 extra years tacked on. Of course, the cap will be up by then. The buyout wasn't that bad. They bought out Ekman Larsson last year, though. They probably don't want to have too much dead money on the book. So we'll see. The Canucks will be a very interesting team to watch throughout the offseason for sure. News out of the Ottawa Senators organization today. They've continued to expand and grow their front office, which is nice to see. Of course, during the Melnick years, the last few years, they were very much a bare bones operation. So nice to see them continue to add people, and not only people, but good people too. They've hired Rob DeMaio to be the Director of Player Personnel and the Director of Pro Scouting. DeMaio has a really nice looking resume. He was most recently the Assistant General Manager with the Anaheim Ducks under Pat Verbeek, where his responsibility was to be the GM of the AHL's San Diego Gulls. Okay, so that was a good responsibility. He did that the past couple of years. Prior to that, he spent 13 years in the Blues organization, where he had a very similar role to what he was just hired with in Ottawa as a Director of Player Personnel and looked after pro scouting. Of course, he won the Stanley Cup with them in 2019. Pro scouting has been a major issue in Ottawa for the last number of years, really. A lot of the pros that they've brought in on trades and free agency have not, there's been a few good ones, but a lot, more often than not, they have not worked out. And they've already made changes to replace some of those pro scouts earlier, and now they bring in DeMaio to oversee it. And clearly, like I said, he played a big role in the Blues organization to help them bring in the right pieces at the pro level to win a Stanley Cup. So, to me, that's a very impressive resume. He had a long-time NHL career as a player, too. Played almost just shy of 900 games. And also as a player, won back-to-back Memorial Cups with the Western Hockey League's Medicine Hat Tigers back in 87-88, which is arguably the hardest trophy in sports to win. So, at the end of the day, I think this was a great hire here by the Ottawa Senators. Nice to see them continue to grow their front office. And it wasn't announced, but after the hire came out, I got looking through their website and just looking at their organizational front office listings on their website here, just to see who was all listed and see if there's been any other changes that maybe were under the radar or stuff that they didn't feel the need to announce. And they did add another pro scout, and that's actually Dale McTavish. Dale McTavish, again, the dad of Mason McTavish, in case you don't know who he is. He played himself hockey for a long time, obviously never made much of a pro career, played a lot overseas in Europe. So he did play pro level, but not so much in North America. But at the end of the day, Dale McTavish is also considered a very bright hockey mind, been around the game forever. So not to say that they're going to be luring Mason McTavish out of Anaheim, obviously with McTavish coming to Ottawa. And then, of course, the pro, DeMaio coming from the Ducks. I know some people were like, oh, geez, maybe they'll bring Mason to Ottawa. Yes, great idea. Good luck getting him out of Pat Verbeek's grips. The price tag to get Mason out of Anaheim would be ridiculous. And as much as Sens fans would love McTavish and whatnot, that would be very expensive and almost impossible to do. The fact that McTavish, if you knew anything about Mason McTavish, you knew that he grew up in the Ottawa area. So really, Dale McTavish already lives in the area. It's not like he's going out of his way to lure his son back. So, but again, just adding to the fact that they're expanding their front office and to see that the pro scouting department, which has been lacking big time, gets a couple of really good names to make things better there in the department. Former Senator and former Chicago Blackhawk Nikita Zaitsev, of course, former Toronto Maple Leaf as well, where he got started in the NHL, is done with the NHL. The 32-year-old defenseman is reported to be signing a multi-year deal to head back to Russia to play in the KHL. So obviously he had one good year in Toronto, got that long-term contract that just finally expired. Ended up in a big trade with the Senators after things soured in Toronto. And then really, like I said, things were not great in Ottawa. They finally were able to move on from him for the last 2 years here of the contract. So at the end of the day, seemed like a good dude and all, but just wasn't really up to speed to be able to play the NHL game much. Like, he had a couple of good seasons, and then it was all kind of downhill from there. But at the end of the day, it's not his fault that he got a big time overpayment in Toronto and had a bad contract. But he's heading back home, which certainly makes sense for him. The Los Angeles Kings are believed to be close to finalizing a contract with interim head coach Jim Hiller. There was some reports today. I know John Hoven, who covers the Kings out west, was reporting earlier that we could get an announcement today, but there was other reports that came out later saying, it's not done yet. It's likely not going to happen. But there is believed to be that he is their guy, and they're just sorting out the contract, which is why it's not been announced yet, and there is belief that DJ Smith, as I mentioned, who was brought on as an assistant, will return with them because there was a team option on his contract there, and they might be looking for a new assistant as well, who was, I believe it was Trent Yanni that was let go or left the Kings organization, so they're looking to replace him. So I would not be surprised if this all gets sorted out. The guys we thought would be in LA will be there. It should be announced sometime later this week. Now we want to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. First, we're going to start with the introduction press conference today of new head coach Craig Berube, what we've learned there, and then we're going to go into some of the trade chatter about what the Leafs might do next. Now that the coaching search is over, they turn their attention and their eyes to the roster and see what they should be doing. Of course, they have some contracts that are coming due, so they're going to make some decisions on free agents, make some decisions on contract extensions, and of course, like I said, start preparing to player movement and what this roster is going to look like. Are they going to talk to some of their top guys or what have you about moving? All that will have to kind of wait to be seen. But the introduction and press conference for Craig Berube, it wasn't like we learned a ton. It was pretty straightforward. Brad Treliving did confirm that he spoke with 9 different individuals for the job. I mean, we don't really know that many of them. Then the rumor mill, we had heard, besides Berube, we had heard Todd McClellan, we had heard Gerard Gallant, I think Jay Woodcroft, and that might be about it. So there's maybe 4 of the 5 names have been floating around out there of guys that were talked to. So there's still about, obviously, another 4 or so that we don't know. Really doesn't matter too much at this point because clearly they were not the ones that were selected. I mean, Berube talked a lot about his style, holding people accountable, being direct but firm, building a partnership with the players, because he was kind of asked, like, how do you go about the accountability and being so firm? And he's like, you have to develop a partnership with the players, and you have an agreement in place. I'm going to do this, you're going to do this. This is what we need you to do. And if they don't own up to it, then you can hold them accountable, and you have that trust that you've built with the players. And that, like I said, that partnership piece that everybody will buy into. So essentially, to me, it sounded really good. I think that's a great way of going about things. He also said that everybody has a role and they have to know and understand what that is. And you need everyone going to be successful when it comes to trying to win a Stanley Cup. Brad Treliving also talked a bit about the accountability piece as well, and kind of being pushed this time of year to the next level. And the follow-up question kind of almost made it sound like they were wondering if he was kind of taking a shot at Sheldon Keefe. They didn't come out and say you're taking a shot at Sheldon, but he wanted to make sure he added a point to that, saying that had nothing to do with Sheldon. And the fact that he said that makes me think it's more of a shot at the roster, just kind of saying that the roster needs to be pushed. Because of this time of year, when it matters most, they've come up short, and they need that extra push, and they need that different style of coach, which Berube certainly will be. Berube's, just to kind of look at one of his quotes, he says they want to be a north, fast, and heavy team. So that's, your standard traditional Craig Berube hockey. So certainly look for changes and input from him to influence what the roster might look like. He was asked as well about his staff. They didn't really clarify this. A lot of those decisions have not been made yet. I know he worked previously with Mike Van Ryn. I suspect he'll be there. There's some rumors about Mark Savard out of Calgary, but again, he's under contract, and where it's not a promotion, they don't have to let him go. So it's not clear if Savard will go. There was some speculation too that DJ Smith may join Craig Berube if the option wasn't there for him to return to LA, but that appears to be happening. So again, Savard and Smith both were rumored assistants for Berube, but appear to be guys that technically have other jobs. So we'll see. I don't know if there's going to be an opportunity there or not, or how that's all going to work. We'll have to wait and be seen how they shape the Berube staff around him. But certainly lots of talk afterwards by different media sources. I know when I was watching the press conference on Sportsnet, which was part of the Jeff Merrick show today, so Merrick was kind of talking about what he suspects the Leafs to be looking at Obviously, between what Brad Treliving likes and what Craig Berube likes and how they shape the roster. Talked a bit about some of the UFAs that he fully suspected that they would be wanting to talk to. You can throw Chris Tanev's name in there. You can throw Brett Pesce's name in there, assuming they make it to this level, of course. I wouldn't rule out Nikita Zadorov, of course, who Treliving signed and had in Calgary, too. So at the end of the day, some size and grit and solid defensive play on the back end, certainly a major priority. I know just to touch back to the Canucks real quick on the Canucks stuff. I know Rick Dollywell was saying that the Canucks obviously had a lot of interest to bring Tanev back to Vancouver, but they believe that his play has been so good in the playoffs and what he was already valued at before that he's going to be too much. As much as they'd love to bring Tanev back, that his asking price is probably going to be too high that they wouldn't be able to afford it. Now, a team like Toronto might overpay. I mentioned the other day about the Senators making it known through their sources that they're very interested, and there's going to be lots of others too. Chris Tanev is going to have a ton of options. And will it all be about money with him? I don't know. I really don't know how he feels and what he wants right now. But Tanev, Pesce, those types of defensemen, should they make it to free agency, they'll definitely be on the Leafs' radar. Jeff Marek also went on to talk about a couple of guys that he thought would be linked to them, including Seth Jones. Of course, Seth Jones, good size, right shot defenseman, good amount of experience now, former very high first-round pick. But he's got a lot of money and time on his contract. He's got 6 more years at $9.5 million. Would he even want to go to Toronto? I don't know. I mean, I know he's expressed some degree of frustration with all the losing in Chicago. I don't think he'd be opposed to leaving Chicago. I don't know how he feels about Toronto, though. I really have no idea. But his name was brought up by Jeff Marek, who's well-connected around the NHL, and, of course, works a lot with Elliot Friedman. I mean, Friedman and Marek quite often have a lot of the inside intel compared to a lot of other guys. So I don't know the likelihood of Seth Jones getting picked up by the Leafs. I'm not sure how that trade would work. But his name was mentioned, so there's got to be something to that. I mean, the fact that they would want a big right shot defenseman doesn't surprise me in the least. Tanev and Pesce might come at a better value because they don't have to give up assets to get them, for starters, if they hit free agency, and they're not going to cost $9.5 million. So they'll probably want to look at a variety of things before they really go down that route. He also brings up the possibility, Marek does, of Jordan Binnington ending up in Toronto. Obviously, Craig Berube won a Stanley Cup with Binnington. He's a goaltender that he would have a lot of time for and he would trust. The goaltending situation in Toronto is very much big question mark and a lot of unsureness about how to move forward. We know that Ilya Samsonov is most likely, like 90% sure, not going back. When Brad Treliving first had his end of season media availability with his other management people, he raved about Joe Woll, but talked a lot about how concerned they were about all the injuries. When it came to Samsonov, all he said was, his contract's expired. So to me, that's as good as gone. They really like Woll, but the injuries greatly concern them. So it is widely expected that they will bring in a veteran goaltender to work with Joe Woll. They got Woll signed for a couple more years at a really cheap price, like under $1 million. I think he's like about $750,000, $800,000, something like that. So like they can add another goalie for a regular starting goaltender salary, depending on how their overall cap situation shakes out, and they can make that work. There's no doubt. So we've been linked to a variety of goalies before. We talked, and a lot of it might depend too on what happens for trades, like Mitch Marner. Marner today got linked again to some teams. We'll talk about him here in a second. But when it comes to Binnington, he's got 3 years left, $6 million, playing for Team Canada right now in the World Championships. There was speculation towards the end of the year, leading into the deadline, the Blues and Doug Armstrong would consider moving him. They do have Joel Hofer, who's an up-and-coming goaltender and might be ready to kind of do what Binnington did when he stole the crease from Jake Allen, that it might be ready to hand the baton over. Obviously, that team is going to have to go through a bit of a I don't want to call it a rebuild, but like a bit of a reset, and definitely have some additional changes this offseason for sure after falling short of the playoffs here again. So I don't know if Binnington were available. Clearly he's a guy that Berube would really like. And depending on how much influence they let him have on this roster, that could be a big thing. I mean, like Merrick said on his show today, a lot of coaches, when they interview for a new job, one of the first questions is, who's our goalie? Show me a good goalie, I'll show you a good coach. That's just how it works. Like, the goaltending plays such a vital role to team success rates and coaching success rates. It's insane. So it makes a ton of sense that there would be interest. Now, how it all would work with the cap, another complication, another issue there, right? Of course, and that takes us to Mitch Marner. We saw a trade today. There's a dedicated video on the channel. Ryan McDonagh moved out of Nashville back to Tampa. Okay, so that's over $6 million cleared off the Nashville Predators books, and it was revealed by Barry Trotz, who spoke to the media afterwards, saying that at the end of the year, McDonagh asked to be traded, which was a bit surprising, and he does have a no move, so he has to be involved in verified trades, and going back to Tampa was something he was very much okay with. Afterwards, McDonagh himself said he spoke to Stamkos today as well about the return. Stamkos was working on, they had just come off the ice, he was working with Kucherov on a bunch of stuff, so it sounds like talks are starting with Stamkos, far from a guarantee, but having McDonagh's salary on Tampa's books is going to make things more challenging. They've only got $5 million in space now, and that includes, needing to sign Stamkos. They have, if they want to keep Duclair, they got to sign him, and they're going to have to sign about at least 2 to 3 other players. That's very complicated. It's not much money. So another bigger salary with McDonagh coming in is likely going to have to move out. We've heard Anthony Cirelli, we've heard Eric Chernak. Like, something's got to give on that front. So it's kind of difficult to say who or what exactly that's going to be. But at the end of the day, I know that could free up the possibility of Steven Stamkos not being able to sign there. And of course, again, a lot of Leaf fans are saying, oh, that's another step closer to Stamkos coming home to Toronto. I was like, not so fast. The Leafs got a lot of things to do here. I guess I can't completely rule it out. I just don't think it's very likely. I do think that Julien Brisebois and Steven Stamkos are going to figure out a way to keep him in Tampa. It's probably going to be another player that they end up becoming a cap casualty and moving out. But again, we'll see. But Barry Trotz was asked point blank in that media conference after talking about the McDonagh trade that, we've heard lots of rumblings that you'd like to add a top player in the forward group, like a top young scoring player to add more offense. We've heard rumblings about maybe Mitch Marner, which I can't believe a reporter actually asked him. He can't comment on another player contracted to another team. And he didn't really answer the question. He just said like Marner's under contract with another team. I can't believe they even talked about that. But to look on Trotz's face, like, to be honest, I would not be shocked if I mentioned Nashville as one of the key places Marner might go to. A lot of players absolutely love Nashville. There's a tax advantage. There's the lifestyle. It's a great place to live, from what a lot of players seem to say. And really, if they could get a good return, like a goaltender, maybe it's Saros, or maybe it's a different combination. Maybe they try to get back Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Shen, guys like that. Hard to say. I don't know. But there's pieces there. And then now they have the space. They have the cap space. They have the assets. Nashville makes a lot of sense for Marner. It really does. And like I said, I don't know about UC Saros. We'll have to see. Would Berube prefer Binnington? There's a lot of moving parts here. Lots of speculation running rampant. It's going to be at least a few weeks before we probably get much clarity on what they're going to do. They definitely haven't had any conversations with Marner or Tavares as of yet about waiving that no-move clause. If they want to consider moving either of them. Tavares is actually playing really well for Team Canada at the Worlds. I'm not sure if he went over there with the expectation or intention to try to show that he can still play to kind of boost his value. I really don't know. I don't think Tavares wants to go anywhere. So to me, the only member of the core four, if there is a trade, would be Marner, because I don't think Tavares is going to agree to it, where we have multiple reporters saying they've heard that Marner would be okay with it. So we'll have to see where it goes, but lots of names being linked to the Maple Leafs today, whether it's Seth Jones, Jordan Binnington, Marner to the Predators again. Could Stamkos come home? I don't think so, but those are all the rumblings around this team here today. There's going to be lots to talk about as the weeks come up, getting closer to the draft and closer to seeing some big-time activity. So let me know your thoughts on what changes we will see of all the players linked to the Leafs, which ones make sense. Give me your mock trades down in the comments. We'll talk further. If you're new to this channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.